Alright guys, this is a little bit different than my usual drum videos. This doesn't really have anything to do with any kind of performance. Um, but it is something that I think is important, and it's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. This week, Rich Redmond, my pal Rich Redmond, and I signed off on the final proofs for our first book, Fundamentals of Drumming for Kids, which is coming out as a book and as a DVD and will have its own website section over on the Modern Drummer website. We're incredibly excited about this. We've been working very hard for probably about 2.5 years now, trying to get this thing off the ground, and we've had a lot of wonderful people lift us up along the way. And I started thinking about this project because it really is sort of like a major milestone in a bunch of wonderful things that has happened to me over the last couple years. I have been able to write for two of the big three major drumming publications. I'm involved with some very exciting musical projects. I've been asked to provide production and loop programming and drum tracks and video work and film replication and all kinds of wonderful opportunities to play drums, to perform drums, to write and record drums. So I really can consider myself now to be a performance and session drummer. And, all that is sort of like in addition to my day job as a professional writer. And a lot of people don't know this, but I really walked away from the drums for about 17 years. It was a humongous part of my life. And I had the opportunity to study with a lot of really fantastic people and play in some incredible situations and compete and just be involved in a variety of different music programs and different bands. And it was something that I really thought I was going to pursue as a career. And I didn't end up taking that particular path. And of course went on to become a writer and a film producer and things like that. So I literally did not even hold a pair of drumsticks in my hand after holding them in my hands almost 23 of 24 hours a day for 9 years, for 17 years, right? I always loved music. I always thought of a drummer. I always found myself, playing around on the steering wheel and listening to grooves and sort of from a distance still continuing to follow the drum community and the drum industry to a certain extent, but not at all in a serious way as I have been over the last couple years since I've sort of gotten back into it. And really that happened because I went to a New Year's Eve party and ended up sitting in with a bunch of musicians that I used to play with when music was a major part of my life. And it really was sort of like one of those moments where I recaptured the love and the passion and the desire not just to play drums but to actually pursue the craft of being a drummer. And I've had, a couple people who I've talked to this about, and they said, my God, imagine how good you'd be now if you hadn't have quit and taken a 17-year hiatus. And, I thought about that, and I'm almost thinking that it really benefited me because I seem to value it more now. Drums is something that I've rediscovered my love for it. I've rediscovered this passion, and I think the fact that I didn't play for so many years is helping me on a couple different levels. Number one, I have an incredible work ethic now in regards to the instrument. I mean, I am constantly practicing all the time. You guys see I'm posting drum videos and pad videos, and I'm reading and studying and writing and just constantly sort of immersing myself in there as a true student of the instrument, which I think is a great thing because it's enabled me to sort of get my chops back to a certain extent and become more of a well-rounded and diverse player, and of course a more hungry player. And number two, I think it makes me appreciate the instrument that much more. It's like a long lost friend, and after you discover it, you suddenly realize how important it was to you, and you cherish it, and I think you treat it with a little bit more love and attention than you probably did before because you took it for granted. So my whole purpose with this video is really just to sort of reemphasize the idea that if you're out there, if you've played an instrument, if you were like me and you grew up in a very robust school music program and you found yourself playing in bands and just sort of doing that whole thing, you know, living the life of a musician, and you realized that as you got older and life's responsibilities and growing up into adulthood required you to sort of, you know, take yourself in a different direction, and you miss it, it's still there. You still can come back. You can still pick up the instrument. And of course, you're not going to be able to play like you did the day you sit down, obviously. And it may take some time for you to get your chops back to the level where you were at when you walked away. But I promise you, if you do it and you rediscover that passion for the instrument, it's going to propel you forward. And you're going to find yourself in some ways even better as a player now in certain aspects of your game than you were back in the day, probably when you were studying all the time and doing performances and competitions and things like that I did. So I'm certainly nowhere near the drummer that I want to be, and I never will be. You know, that's kind of the neat thing about pursuing an instrument or any form of art. You're constantly trying to sort of reach an unobtainable level of perfection. But I love it, and it's a humongous part of my life, and it's enabled me to foster some wonderful relationships with great people. And I'm not just talking about, you know, the famous drummers that I know now. You know, I got this wonderful Rolodex of all these great, you know, big name players, but just regular guys, regular drummers, students, children. Anybody that wants to pick up a pair of drumsticks and just wail away and enjoy themselves, no matter how good they are, no matter how experienced they are, and no matter how serious they are. Because at the end of the day, you have to enjoy what you're doing or it's not worth doing it. So it's just something to keep in mind. It's been weighing on my heart, and I just wanted to share it with you. You can always come back. The instrument is there, and if you take the time to make that step, I promise you, if you were a musician that was meant to be, it will be like you've never ever left, and you'll find yourself sliding right into that same familiar comfort zone that you had when you were, you know, pursuing music before. So just something to think about. I want to thank everybody out there for your continued support. I would not be able to accomplish any of the things that I've accomplished in with a book or magazines or videos or recordings or any of the stuff that I'm doing if I didn't have people that were lifting me up. We all certainly make each other better, and I just wanted to share that with you guys. So something to think about, and please keep an eye out for Fundamentals of Drumming for Kids. Rich and I are just so excited. As soon as Modern Drummer gives us a release date, we will have a wonderful announcement, and we've got some really neat sort of projects in the works in regards to that. Some supplemental things, maybe some clinics, some book signings, so we're just getting started. Anyway, have a great night.